What's up, folks? What's going on? Welcome to the Spun Today Podcast, the only podcast that is anchored in writing, but unlimited in scope. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz, and I appreciate you listening. This is episode 292, and in this episode, I have another free writing session for you fine folks that will help motivate and inspire you to get your thoughts down on paper and expand those creative ideas. In this session, I'm sharing my latest writing stats, some quick writing lessons that I've picked up on along the way, and a few notes from what I've been reading lately. Today, that's Manhattan Noir, edited by Lawrence Block. It's a gritty anthology full of neighborhood-based stories that explore the darker corners of New York City. And last but certainly not least, I'll be sharing a free writing piece of my own. Stick around for all that good stuff, but first, I wanted to tell you all about a quick way that you can help support this show. Your support means a ton. It's highly appreciated. I really do appreciate it. It helps keep the lights on here in the proverbial Spun Today studios and motivates me to continue putting out content that you all will appreciate. So aside from visiting spuntoday.com/support, where you'll see all my affiliate links and discount codes that I have for you folks, here is one of the ways that you can help support this show. And then we'll jump right into the episode. For my fellow writers and creatives out there, a really cool way you can help support this show is by going to spuntoday.com/support and clicking on the Pro Writing Aid banner. If you're a listener of the show, you know that I use Pro Writing Aid to pre-edit all of my writing before I put it out or before I ship it off to my editor so that it is in as pristine condition as I can probably get it. Pro Writing Aid offers a great toolkit that helps you polish your work with easy-to-use grammar checks and a writing assistant that also looks into things like pacing improvements, typos, punctuations, and much more. Go to spuntoday.com/support, click on the banner for Pro Writing Aid, and check out their free option as well as their different tiers of paid options. spuntoday.com/support. My writing stats. For August 2025, I absolutely stepped my game up a bit to a level that I'm actually satisfied with when factoring in other life dynamic stuff. But I wrote 16 out of the 31 days in August for a writing percentage of 51.61%. It's actually, if I'm not mistaken, my highest writing percentage for this year, which is deplorable, as Hillary Clinton would say. And for September month end, similar to June and July of this year, I did not track my writing stats, which means I didn't do enough writing to actually even track it. I know I worked on a little minor things here and there, but definitely not a good job of staying consistent and also not a good job of executing the tracking portion. But I have re-picked up. I also went on vacation, by the way, which I'll tell you guys about in another episode. Took a family vacation out to Aruba, which was awesome. But I did start picking up the tracking again in October. So for the next free writing session episode, you guys will definitely see what I've been up to there. And just in terms of writing, I am excited to share that I had, for folks that listen to my podcast, you know that after writing my first novel, Fractal, the science fiction time travel novel, I've had a bit of writer's block in terms of the second book in that series. I have written for it, but definitely not enough, especially being that it's been about 4 years now, maybe even more, since the first one came out, and I published Melted Cold in between then. That's how much writer's block I had for that series specifically, that I went off and wrote, edited, and published a short story collection. Talk about resistance, right? But I had a breakthrough, an epiphany. I knew I had seeds of ideas, and I have tons of research files within like my Scrivener writing program, like within the binder there, for the second book and even for the third book. But I just couldn't get anything exciting going, like enough to like pull me into, okay, this is the story that I'm going to tell. And I know I had that feeling for the first one, but I did have like a creative break there, and something just clicked, and I outlined it, mapped it all out, And I'm actually excited again about sitting down and, as Jordan Peele once said, just start filling up the sandbox with sand and getting that first draft out, that complete from beginning to end first draft out. And then after all that sand is in the sandbox, then start creating the castles that I want to create. But now, like, I have enough of the elements of the ideas and the previous research that I did and the trajectory that I want to head in to be able to begin practically tackling it. So really excited about that. I think that's going to help with these writing stats to bump them up through the fourth quarter of this year. And those are my writing stats. The writing tip that I want to share with you folks this episode, it's actually going to be two of them, and I'm pulling them from my Instagram stories. So I actually have this cool section that even I revisit from time to time where I save Instagram stories under writing advice that you guys should definitely check out, especially for my fellow creatives out there. It's pretty motivating, inspiring. It has been for me. Kind of gives you like a nudge and a kick in the ass when you need a bit of that. So definitely check it out in my Instagram page at Spun Today on Instagram, where I'll take like a quote that a writer has said or a snippet of an interview or a panel that they're on where they're speaking about their creative process and things that I kind of want to save and keep within my little creative toolkit, if you will. And I save them all down there under the writing advice stories. So check that out. Both of the writing tips that I'm going to share with you guys today are from there. The first one is a quote from Sandra Chwialkowska. Apologies in advance for butchering that last name. But she said, quote, "You don't really know what your novel is about until you've written it. So the purpose of your first draft is to figure out what you're trying to say," end quote. And that's helpful to me, particularly in like the mind state that I'm in with book 2 in the Fractal series, where I'm kind of letting perfectionism or the expectation of to stop me from moving forward at all. Because I think I need every single thing worked out before beginning to write it all, which is not the case. It's never been the case. I don't know why I've been stuck on that, and particularly with this book, because I've been able to write other things, like I mentioned earlier. But I like advice like that because it is just a reminder to that and kind of gives you license or permission, if you will, to be like, oh yeah, it's true. I don't have to have every single nook and cranny figured out. I can start writing it and it's a draft. It's not going anywhere. It's for my eyes only. You know, just start adding sand to the sandbox. Then once you have your sand, then start, throwing out the sand you don't need, forming the pillars of your castle as you need them with the sand that you do have, that you do want to keep, so on and so forth. So I very much so appreciate that quote from that perspective. The next piece of advice and the second tip that I'm sharing with you guys today is actually from Jordan Peele. And it's a clip from when he was on a panel for Film Independent. And he said, quote, "If you're not having fun writing, you're doing it wrong. I can't worry about the movie getting made. I have to write my favorite movie that doesn't exist." And it wasn't like I was writing and then he motions like feverishly writing. And he says, it wasn't like I was feverishly writing for like 5 years straight. I allowed it to be my hobby. I allowed it to be the project that I would go to instead of watching television, and that would be the most fun thing that I could do with my time. And the whole purpose of it was to help me get better as a writer. I know that from Key and Peele, when you're having fun writing, that's when you get the east-west bullshit. It works. Fun works. Any writer or artist dealing with writer's block, which we all deal with, follow the fun. End quote. And that's great advice there. And it's akin to what I was saying earlier about the like breakthrough idea that I had and being excited about it. Follow the fun, like Jordan Peele says there, or in my case, follow the excitement about something. And I like how that advice is grounded in reality, like how he says, because from the outside looking in, if somebody says they're a writer or they write stories or they wrote this X, Y, and Z, you kind of have this, or at least I like project this like aura around them. Like, oh my God, they're like this professional writer that sits down and 24/7 is just thinking about stories and nothing else, and is so prolific and putting out 1,000 pages a day, or words rather, a day, etc., etc. Wait, how he says there, this very successful writer, director, creative, he points out there that it wasn't that. It wasn't feverishly, intensely writing day in and day out. It was something that he allowed to be a hobby. He allowed himself to, he created a situation where he would look forward to the thing, where he would get excited about it, where he wanted to do that as fun, more so than just sitting down and watching TV. I think that's a really important point and lesson to take away there. And of course, like he says, follow the fun. And how I'll add, follow the excitement. Follow what makes you excited. And that, my dear listeners, are the writing tips that I wanted to share with you guys in this episode. If you want to check those out and more, follow me on Instagram at Spun Today and check out the writing advice stories section. What I've been reading. I've been reading Manhattan Noir, which is a short story anthology, and I will mention each and every one of the writers involved in a bit. But first, I just want to say that there will be spoilers as I recap some of the stories from this book and share some writing insights that I took away from it. So consider yourselves warned. First off, I wanted to mention how I discovered the book. I actually came across Manhattan Noir from a recommendation by Sam Morrill on the We Might Be Drunk podcast during the episode with Greg Fitzsimmons. And he recapped a couple of the stories in it, including the one that turned out to be my favorite that I'm going to share with you guys in a bit. And the concept of the series really interested me, and I decided to check it out. And I'm glad I did. So hat tip to Sam Morrill for a really dope rec. Now, according to the editor of the book, Lawrence Block, the challenge that he put out to writers was that each story had to take place in a different neighborhood of Manhattan. And that concept alone makes this series worth reading. It's like a dark literary subway ride through the city. Now let's shout out the writers of this great anthology, because if we don't give it up to the writers here on the Spun Today podcast, then who will? The writers are Charles Ardai, who wrote The Good Samaritan that takes place in Midtown, which was, by the way, my favorite story, a lot of which I'm going to share with you guys in a bit. Carol Leah Benjamin, who wrote The Last Supper. That one was good too, which takes place in Greenwich Village. Lawrence Block, which is also the editor of the anthology, he wrote If You Can't Stand the Heat, which takes place in Clinton. That was actually pretty good too. That's an honorable mention. Thomas H. Cook, who wrote Rain, taking place in Battery Park. Jeffrey Deaver, who wrote A Nice Place to Visit, taking place in Hell's Kitchen. That was a cool one. Jim Fuseli, which makes me think of Fuseli Jerry, wrote The Next Best Thing, taking place at the George Washington Bridge. Robert Knightley wrote Take the Man's Pay, taking place in the Garment District. John Lutz wrote The Laundry Room, taking place in the Upper West Side. Liz Martinez wrote Freddie Prinze is My Guardian Angel, which was a fun one, taking place in Washington Heights. Man Myers wrote The Organ Grinder, taking place in LES, the Lower East Side. Martin Myers wrote Why Do They Have to Hit, taking place in Yorkville. S.J. Rosen wrote Building, taking place in Harlem. Justin Scott wrote The Most Beautiful Apartment in New York, taking place in Chelsea. C.J. Sullivan wrote The Last Round, taking place in Inwood. And last but certainly not least, Juge wrote Crying with Audrey Hepburn, taking place in Times Square. Shout out to each and every one of those great writers that put this really dope anthology series together. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that there are other noir books, at least one, maybe two of which I plan on checking out, and maybe more after that, depending on how those go. But it's a whole noir series. The Akashic noir series, they're called. There's a Brooklyn Noir, a Brooklyn Noir 2, a DC Noir, Baltimore Noir, Dublin Noir, Chicago Noir, San Francisco Noir. And forthcoming are Twin Cities Noir, Los Angeles Noir, London Noir, Wall Street Noir, Miami Noir, Havana Noir, Bronx Noir, and Lone Star Noir. I'm definitely going to check out the Brooklyn one next. Depending on that goes Brooklyn Part 2, and I'm looking forward to the Wall Street one as well. I'll definitely keep you fine folks posted on those. So I've made notes as I do while reading or listening to the audiobook of these stories. And I want to share some of my key takeaways and writing moments that really stood out to me. Starting with my favorite story in the series, which opens up the anthology, The Good Samaritan by Charles R. Dye. So this story takes place in Midtown Manhattan, and there are homeless people turning up dead very frequently, multiple within a week, every other day in some cases. And the story follows a detective and his partner who are trying to figure out who the killer is, or first trying to figure out if these are accidental or coincidental. And it's tough for them to piece investigations together because they are homeless victims. You know, they don't have a lot to go by, no known friends or family or relatives that they could connect to and question. And everyone seems all but happy to write them off as accidents or, you know, homeless people being ill and passing away due to the poor conditions that they live in. But this one detective is not letting up. He's continuing to pursue and ultimately pieces together from a conversation with one homeless person that there was this really nice guy that came up to her and offered her a free cigarette. The detective didn't think anything of it really. You know, he's just going around interviewing different homeless people. And the next day, that homeless person turned up dead. That same one. And the detective remembered the anecdote of someone offering them a cigarette. They find the cigarette there by the body, sent it in for testing, and found that it did have poison in it. So it was a poisonous cigarette. Then went back to a couple of the other homeless deaths that had occurred and actually found one of the more recent ones and picked up a cigarette that was left within the magazine that was found on the homeless person that had passed. Took that into evidence and tested that, and it came up positive again for the same poison. So they pieced together somebody's going around poisoning homeless people with cigarettes. The partner is thinking from a practical perspective, you know, what can we do? We can't just arrest everybody that smokes this name brand cigarette that everybody smokes. But the main detective doesn't let up, doesn't want to let it go, doesn't want to write it off so easily. He takes it upon himself to go undercover as a homeless person. So he dresses up all tattered and starts sleeping in the street. Sleeps in the street one night, spends the whole day, the next day on the street in a different location, moving from spot to spot, seeing what he can pick up on, hoping that somebody comes up to him and offers him a cigarette. And I really like the description here of what the homeless detective saw while sitting on the floor. There's a point where he starts describing people just walking by, the way their arms would swing as they walked, their legs, some of the children being at eye level, and the parents would pull their curious faces away from him, bike tires rotating, etc. And they were like simple descriptions, but it made it incredibly visual. It made you think about being there in that perspective of someone laying or sitting on the floor. Then ultimately, a well-dressed, middle-aged man approaches him and offers him a cigarette. And he has concealed under his clothes his gun and a recorder. And he's second-guessing himself because this just looks like an ordinary, like a well-put-together, articulate, older man. But it's the same brand of cigarette. So he starts pressing the guy and telling him to smoke a cigarette. But he refuses. He said he doesn't want to. But he's insistent that he, the homeless man, take the free cigarette and smoke it. Then the cop pulls out his gun and essentially forces a confession out of him. and he admits to the whole thing that he has been killing the homeless people. But when confronted about it, the killer says that he's poisoning the homeless to put them out of their misery because they shouldn't live that way. Doing drugs and selling their bodies, that's no way to live, he thought. And the way he's doing it, they feel no pain. They just smoke a cigarette, go to sleep, and don't wake up the next day. And in that exchange between the two characters, it really stood out to me how troubled he was by the fact that he couldn't seem to come to terms with what the detective was telling him he was doing, which was killing people, who just continue justifying it in that way. That, no, I'm just giving them a cigarette. I'm putting them out of their misery. I'm helping them. And that psychological realism is haunting in a way. Because aside from him being a sick fuck, going around murdering people and justifying it and rationalizing it to himself, the mental gymnastics that someone is able and willing to do to make themselves think and believe that what they're doing is okay, just really stood out to me. And in that moment, the quote unquote homeless detective who was recording the conversation and had this guy dead to rights from a legal perspective just started noticing how well dressed he was and how he had a nice watch on his hand and expensive shoes on, and how he was visibly terrified of the gun but still showed no remorse about what he was doing and was insistent on the fact that he's doing something good. He's helping them, putting them out of their misery. He started playing things out in his head on how this guy would hire some hotshot fancy attorney to defend him in court, and that even them having a recorded confession on tape, the attorney would write that off to the jury by saying something along the lines of course he admitted to the crime. Wouldn't you if you had a gun to your head? And then juxtapose with the fact that all the victims are these voiceless homeless people who would have nobody speaking on their behalf. He decided to take matters into his own hands. He drew his gun and forced the man to smoke his own cigarette, and if not, threatened to shoot him. He refused. He's pushing back on the idea, obviously, but ultimately succumbed to the fear of the gun and wound up smoking the cigarette. And then the cop, after the guy fell asleep, took his homeless clothes off that he was wearing, put it on the guy, exchanged clothes with him, left the scene without anyone around, and the next day it was just reported that another homeless person was found dead on the side of the street. How dope is that story? I haven't gotten tired of sharing that with people, so I hope you all get a kick out of it as well. That's one of the stories that Sam Morril, by the way, when he was telling Mark Norman and Greg Fitzsimmons about the series, he broke down that story as well. And even though I knew what was happening, it still made me want to read the story, and I'm definitely glad I did. So just because you know what's going to happen, definitely don't let that deter you from checking it out. Another one that got my attention was A Nice Place to Visit by Jeffrey Deaver, which took place in Hell's Kitchen. It's a story about this girl that's at a bar that seems like she's being set up to be victimized, but she flips the script. And it turns out that she's the predator. She's been going to different bars, different neighborhoods, different places, and playing the role of, single, naive girl until guys offer to buy her a drink. She goes back to their place, and then she winds up drugging them, slipping a roofie in their drinks, and just robbing them blind. And it's a classic noir, power dynamics flipped on their head, and a story of danger hiding behind charm. So coming from an unexpected place. And the story actually reminded me of a short story of mine, which if you're interested, you can definitely check out in my short story series, Melted Cold. And it reminded me of the story Ball and Chain that I have in there, where I have a role reversal dynamic flip of sorts, where the wife in that story turns out to be a serial killer. Spoiler alert, right? But if you want to check that out at spuntoday.com/books. There's one more story I wanted to tell you guys about. It was a fun one, and it was Freddie Prinze is My Guardian Angel by Liz Martinez. And this one takes place in Washington Heights. And it's a coming of age story of a young girl who idolized Freddie Prinze. She was his like #1 stan before he died. And then after he died, she was such a huge fan of his that he started appearing to her at different stages throughout her life. And she finds that he's her guardian angel. And at different moments throughout her life, you know, sometimes months would pass, years would pass in between visits, but he would always nudge her towards joining the NYPD, becoming a cop. He tells her that that's her calling. That's what she's meant to do. And it's his job to make sure that she goes in that direction. And she had zero interest in this, something she had never thought of before. So she kind of writes it off. She has other pursuits, but, you know, has this relationship with Freddie Prinze. And there's a section in the story where she confronts him and she's like, right, if you're my guardian angel, you know, help me out. You know, give me the name of the horses that are gonna, or the horse rather, that's gonna win this race this weekend so that I can bet on it and make some money because I'm struggling, so on and so forth. And he tells her that doesn't really work that way. He can try, but he's not supposed to do stuff like that. And she's asking for this because he came back at this point to tell her to stay away from a specific person. He gives her the name of the person, and that, you know, it's a name that she hadn't heard before, but she's like, whatever, okay, but I'll do that if you do this for me and give me the name of this horse that's gonna win this race. And he gives her the two names begrudgingly, and then she goes to bet on the horse and sees the name of the guy that he told her to stay away from. So now she's like confused. She's like, wait, do I stay away from betting on this horse then? Like, what I do? So she winds up not betting, and the horse wins. She would have won a bunch of money, and she winds up not betting on it because the signals got crossed there. And then she has this friend who is into modeling and wants to be an actress and a model. She and her friend both kind of look alike. A lot of people mistake them as sisters, and they get approached by this like shady looking agent guy, and he has the other name or a characteristic of the other name that she thought was the horse's name. So now she's like, wait, this guy does seem kind of shady. Maybe this is the one I was supposed to stay away from because the horse like bet hit and I would have won. So I'm going to stay away from that guy. And she tells her friend, listen, stay away from him. I can't tell you why, but I don't trust him. And the friend doesn't listen to her and, you know, goes with this agent to like shoot a portfolio and, you know, this very cliche type of thing. But the agent winds up booking her for a commercial, booking her for multiple commercials after that. She winds up going off to becoming a successful actress, and, you know, they get estranged, the two friends. So essentially, Freddie Prinze comes back like at a later time in her life, and she's like, yeah, what the fuck? I would have made a bunch of money with the horses, and I would have been a famous actress model. And he was like, you know, I'm sorry, I mixed the names up. I made a mistake. And then she winds up growing up, going to college. She starts dating this guy who is a cop, and it's the first time she starts thinking really of becoming a police officer, and, you know, had Freddie Prinze in her head all those years, saying that that's her calling, that's where she's meant to be. And she winds up becoming a cop, and she's a good one. The relationship with the guy doesn't work out, but she's very, very into her profession. And Freddie Prinze comes back and tells her, listen, you are going to be in a situation with a homeless person, and just do not shoot them. That is the whole purpose of why I've been appearing all these years. You will regret it for the rest of your life if you shoot that person. You're going to get into this confrontation. It'll be okay. Just don't shoot. Whatever you do, do not shoot. And, you know, she goes on with her life, takes the advice, goes on with her life, and is in this situation with a belligerent homeless person who attacks her, attacks her partner, and the person slashes her face. She has blood running down her cheek, and she starts remembering now the advice, the warning from Freddie Prinze. Don't shoot the homeless person. You're going to regret it for the rest of your life. And I really like here from a writing perspective how the author slowed the time here. They wrote about when she drew her gun on the homeless person and the homeless person slashes her face, and her remembering the words, of Freddie Prinze of not shooting or you regret it for the rest of your life, and how the writer writes, every second felt like a month, and the sounds of the city went away, and all I heard was the blood pulsing in my ears. My target became blurry. Like that kind of writing, slowing down time under stress, was a great writing technique that is something that stood out to me. And she listens to the advice of Freddie Prinze. She doesn't shoot when the attacker continues to come at her. She winds up getting stabbed multiple times and dying. And her spirit lifts up out of her body. She sees herself on the ground dead. Freddie Prinze appears to her and tells her that he mixed things up again. And the final line in the story captures the dark humor of it, which was, what do you expect when Freddie Prinze is your guardian angel? Now, those were the main stories that stood out to me from this series. And there's another good one, actually, of a con man that is selling fake boats and winds up getting out-conned by others, but I'll let you discover that one right yourselves. But I'm liking these short stories, though, because they teach pacing and tone. Like if you're looking at it from a creative lens, through that perspective, pacing and tone, and the characters are like really compressed. Each story has to build a full world just within a few pages, so it forces writers to make every sentence count, which is another great takeaway for myself. So I'm definitely looking forward to reading a few more in the Noir series. And if you're a writer, here's a great exercise. Pick a neighborhood or a single street corner that you know well and try to write a story that could only happen there. Because noir isn't just about crime, it's about consequence, it's about motivation, and that gray space between right and wrong. And if you want to check out Manhattan Noir, I'll drop a link in the episode description for you folks to check out. I flipped through one of my trusty little notebooks and have a free writing piece to share with you folks. This one is not on my website, so it's not at spuntoday.com/free writing, where I transcribe a bunch of the free writing that I do in my notebooks, and I put it on there for folks to check out. But there is a ton there that you guys can go see. This one, for whatever reason, I never put on my website. Maybe I will, but it might also be just a podcast exclusive. So this is a piece that I wrote reflecting on something that was said. So sometimes I go into free writing where it's just pen to paper. I write anything and everything that comes to mind. And sometimes I free write based on a specific quote or a clip or something that's said either in a movie or in an interview. And this is one of those. So it was from a radio interview with Vince Staples. And he said, quote, "A lot of a skill set is just dedication and understanding and kind of taking yourself out of it. Because if you know you're not good, then you'll get better." End quote. And to that I wrote, objectivity. How's the Serenity prayer go? Grant me the courage to change what I can, the composure to avoid what I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. Something along those lines. It lends itself to objectivity, which is at the core of what Vince is speaking to here in the second half of that statement. There's courage in the act of being objective, in disconnecting and removing yourself from yourself in order to constructively criticize your progress in something or lack thereof. The first part of that statement is straight Mamba mentality, that 10-letter word that so many of us fall short of implementing and following through on. Is this a simplistic view on how one can improve? I don't think so. I think it's spot on. Foundational. A base that you can build your winning recipe off of. Dedicate yourself and get to know yourself enough to know when a course correction is in order. And I wrote that on July 21st, 2022 at 8:08 a.m. And I was looking at this to see what I meant by the section, the first part of that statement, straight Mamba mentality, that 10-letter word that so many of us fall short of. And I was looking back at Vince's statement, and he says in the first part of it, a lot of a skill set is just dedication. And dedication is that 10-letter word that I was referencing. So in case you were wondering, I was wondering as well. And that's what it is. But I do agree with a lot of this still, that a lot of creative pursuits is dedication, is showing up, is consistency, and having the objectivity to know when you're slacking, when you're lacking, is definitely a good tool to have and to be able to implement. Another key part is the disconnecting and removing yourself from yourself in order to constructively criticize your progress. That's key, because a lot of us, myself included, can be like too close to something, and can also fall into the mistake of making up excuses and rationalizing things of why you didn't get something done, why you didn't achieve a specific goal, so on and so forth. So being able to remove yourself from that type of pitfall would definitely come in handy when a course correction is in order. But yeah, maybe I will put this one on the site. If I do, you can check it out at spuntoday.com/freewriting. Even if I don't, you can definitely rewind this as much as you like and listen to me read it. But definitely check out the website, spuntoday.com/freewriting, for a ton of other pieces. And that, folks, was episode 292 of the Spun Today Podcast. Thank each and every one of you for taking the time to listen. It is very much so appreciated. Please stick around for a few ways you can help support this podcast if you so choose, which I really, really do appreciate. Your support goes a long way. And until next time, peace. What's up, folks? Tony here. I hope you're enjoying the Spun Today podcast as much as I enjoy producing it for you. Here are a few ways you can help support the show. For my fellow writers and creatives out there, a really cool way you can help support the show is by going to spuntoday.com/support and clicking on the Pro Writing Aid banner. If you're a listener of the show, you know that I use Pro Writing Aid to pre-edit all of my writing before I put it out or before I ship it off to my editor, so that it is in as pristine condition as I can probably get it. Pro Writing Aid offers a great toolkit that helps you polish your work with easy-to-use grammar checks, and the writing assistant that also looks into things like pacing improvements, typos, punctuations, and much more. Go to spuntoday.com/support, click on the banner for Pro Writing Aid, and check out their free option as well as their different tiers of paid options. spuntoday.com/support. A great way for my fellow writers and creatives out there to help support this show is by going to spuntoday.com/support and clicking on the mock-up shots banner. When I first started writing and putting out content, I wanted to think of creative ways to help market my books. So I would take my own pictures, place the books in different places, take it to the beach with me, put it out in the snow, and I'd wind up with a couple good usable images and a bunch more mediocre ones. And also, in the case of the snow example, a completely soggy book. Then I found mock-up shots. In one click, mock-up shots turns your book cover into thousands of images, videos, graphics, and more. If you follow me on social, it's what I use to promote my books. You can check them out on Instagram at Spun Today to take a look at the professional creative quality of what Mockup Shots has to offer. And now for my listeners, you can get unlimited lifetime access to the largest instant book mockup archive for 50% off. That's right, that's 50% off. And you can use it for any books that you currently have available or any books that you will write in the future. I highly recommend it. It's a great marketing tool. Go to spuntoday.com/support and click on the banner for Mockup Shots to claim your 50% off discount. You can also support by checking out my writing. Go to spuntoday.com/freewriting. Here, you'll find a collection of freely written thoughts, which is intended to be a cathartic, meditative practice for myself, but also winds up doubling up as motivation and inspiration for myself and others. You can also go to spuntoday.com/short stories to check out my latest short stories, and also listen to the free audiobook versions of those stories. You can also support my writing by going to spuntoday.com/books. and check out what I have available for sale. Currently available is Make Way for You, which is a collection of tips for getting out of your own way. It's a great read for my fellow writers or creatives out there. Also available is Fractal, which is my debut time travel novel. And last but certainly not least, Melted Cold, which is a collection of short stories. Each of the books are available in all digital formats for your Kindle or iBook or any other e-reader, as well as paperback and hardcover options. Again, go to spuntoday.com/books, and I'd love to hear what you chose to check out, as well as your thoughts after reading. spuntoday.com/books. If you're a fellow creative, a cool way that you can help support the Spun Today podcast and actually be part of the podcast is by filling out my 5-question questionnaire located at spuntoday.com/questionnaire. Here you'll find 5 open questions related to your craft, your art, what inspires you to create, what type of unrelated hobbies you're into, and what motivates you to get your work done. You can choose to remain anonymous or plug your website and your work. And once you submit your questionnaire, I read your responses on a future episode of the Spun Today podcast. It's completely free at no cost to you. And what I like to say about it is that if your responses could potentially spark inspiration in someone else, why not share that? spuntoday.com/questionnaire. And as always, folks, substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. Thanks for listening. I love you, Aiden.
I love you, Daddy.
I love you, Grayson.
I love you, Daddy.